Hello. Looking here at Blur's self-titled 1997 album, Blur. Front cover there is looks like someone's wheeling a gurney in a hospital, into a hospital room. Blurred, isn't that? Is that on intentional? A blurred picture on a Blur album with this kind of yellowy brownish color that whenever I see that tone, it reminds me of this album. Um, on the back cover, we got a kind of volcanically active area. I think this is actually, I read this is when they recorded part of this album in Reykjavik in Iceland, and Iceland is obviously a famously volcanically active with geothermal activity. I think they use geothermal activity as their power source, don't know, to heat water and stuff like that. But anyway, I got this secondhand. I've owned this. This is my third copy I've owned. And I'll talk about a bit about the first copy I owned later in the video. But yeah, I've owned it new twice, and this is the third copy secondhand. I got this for 50 cents, and the condition is pretty much okay, a little bit battered, and it does have the previous owner's name written in Sharpie, or whatever you want to call it, on the CD itself, but that's okay. The case is fine, the teeth are intact. There's this kind of weird, I don't know if that's coming across on the camera, this kind of like cloudiness on the edge of the CD. I don't know if that is a phenomenon that is people know about, does that happen to CDs after a while? Kind of gets like this cloudiness. But it plays fine because I played the CD a lot. I listened to the CD a lot, and I've never had any issues with it. Um, I own the majority of the Blur discography. As we see inside, we have the four members of Blur: Graham Coxon on guitar. See that with the Telecaster he's holding there. Damon Albarn, singer, sometimes a guitarist, main song, or at least lyricist. I don't know if he's actually the songwriter. In front of a keyboard, there's Dave Roundtree, drummer, and Alex James, bassist. I've got to say, when I started learning bass or playing bass guitar in my late teens, early 20s, Alex James was one of the main reasons why I decided to pick up a bass. I absolutely love some of his bass lines, particularly the one from Girls and Boys, and the one from Coffee and TV. Yeah, he's someone called him a girly bassist. Don't know what that means. They said he has the most girly bass lines, but they weren't saying in a pejorative meaning. They I don't know what it means. Is there something feminine about the way he plays bass or about the lines he writes? I don't know. But there's no lyrics in this, and there's no like liner notes at all. Gee, that's very sparse, isn't it? A little bit munched on the corner there of the booklet, but oh well. I'll try and get that back in without further damaging it. So this album and Blur. Growing up, I was an Oasis fan. Uh, the late part of the definitely maybe album cycle, and when What's a Story, Morning Glory came out, I was at the peak of my fandom. I loved Oasis, um, and the whole Blur versus Oasis thing didn't really cross over here in New Zealand. We didn't, it was obviously a big thing in the British music press, but it wasn't such a big thing here. I did know it existed, but it wasn't something I followed, and that was mainly it wasn't a thing here is because Blur kind of were not big at all. The first time I heard about Blur is my cousin got a Blur cassette tape for Christmas. She got The Great Escape on cassette, and she was like, "Oh, I got a Blur CD, a Blur tape," and I was like, "Who's Blur?" So when did Great Escape come out? That was at 95, was it? Must have been around 95. And 95. So that was Christmas 95. So it's actually quite late. I still hadn't heard of Blur. But after that, I think I started hearing some of them. I heard Country House and I heard Park Life. 95. Yeah, 96, 90. I'm trying to kind of place it in my musical memory. Definitely by late 96, I'd heard stuff of Blur. Charmless Man, Park Life, The Universal, Country House. And some of their songs, I like Park Life, but I really didn't like Country House. I still don't like Country House now. It's to me, it sounds like a joke song, like a novelty hit, and that's kind of I think that affected them badly. I think that they have never really shaken that idea with a lot of people who don't really go in depth with their music. They kind of people kind of see them a bit as yeah, as like a joke band in some ways, like kind of. But going back and listening, you can hear, they aren't that, and all those their early albums, Modern Life is Rubbish, Park Life, Great Escape. There was great songs on all those albums, but I think interspersed also with some songs that are not so great. And there's a certain thing Blur does that I don't like. And maybe the reason why I like this, I didn't say that this is my favorite Blur album by quite some distance, is that this album avoids, it's kind of like the "How's Your Father" type jokey, very British thing that they do on some of their songs, some of their music. Not on all their music, but, and also kind of the image they portrayed, especially Damon portrayed. Particularly shown with things like Park Life, the video for that, what they did with that, I can't, what was the guy, Phil Daniels, and the video for Country Life, all very Benny Hill. This album seemed Graham Coxon had more say, and it was almost like an intentional move away from that. Not Britpop at all. They kind of were, maybe that because they won the single, didn't it? It was Country House versus Roll With It by Blur, and I think Country House sold more. But then you'd say that they won the battle, but Oasis won the war, because Oasis were and are a much much bigger band than Blur ever were. Blur is still really popular, big band, but certainly never broke America to the extent Oasis did, and don't have the kind of international following that Oasis do. Anyway, I bought this album off the back of the single Beetle Bum. So Beetle Bum was the first single, which was released shortly before the album was released. It was early 1997. And there's something about that song that connects with me in some kind of deep emotional way, and I don't know what exactly. And that's further kind of emphasized by the video. And if you maybe if I like, I'm not going to recommend the video because I think most people just watch that video, and it's them performing live, performing the song, not live, but performing along to the video in like in a room, a carpeted room, and there's nothing else. And then kind of as where the chorus goes, it kind of zooms out up into space for a second, and then there's the coda of the song. If you've ever listened to Beetle Bum, you know the coda. Dee, dee, dee. I'm not going to try and sing it. I can't do it. And the coda, Damon Albarn goes and stands by the window of this room. It looks like they're in London, by the way. And it's kind of, it looks like an early morning as the sun is rising. And the camera kind of pulls back from him. I guess this would have been a helicopter shot because this is many years before drones were a going concern. And the pulls back from him out of the building, and you can still see him in the window, but then it kind of pulls back further and further from the building, and then it kind of goes out into the sky of, like I said, early morning London, and kind of flies across the buildings and car park. And man, I loved that when I was when I was a 16-year-old me. I don't know why, but it was like something that so personally, I don't know, I can't put into words why I like that, because this really is nothing special, but that song and that video, to this day, I hold a special place in my heart. Then they released Song 2, so Beetlebum Song 2, track 1 and 2, and that was one of their biggest songs, wasn't it? That kind of did get some traction in America. I remember they had it on The Simpsons, didn't they? They used it on The Simpsons, and apparently it's used in like hockey arenas, like at sports events. It's that kind of song, gets people revved up, easy to sing along to. Really, really great hook. I like that song, especially like the drum pattern at the start of that song. Um, so what else we got here? Country Sad Ballad Man. That's kind of like almost like an alt country type song. Very kind of distorted, languid kind of feeling to it. MOR, I think that was another single. Middle of the Road. Theme from Retro. Oh, sorry, I missed it. On Your Own. That was also a single, wasn't it? That's the one that uses a drum machine. Or like it sounds like a Casio keyboard type drum, like a very simplistic drum machine, and like sound effects. Theme from Retro is instrumental with a heavy use of like an organ, like a Hammond type organ or something. That's another song I really like. It makes this atmosphere of this like a oppressively dark, but it like reminds me of like a nighttime in a particular kind of city. I read a review once and they said that was a throwaway song, which I really disagree with. For me, that's one of my favorite songs on the album. You're So Great. This is a song that's basically just Graham Coxon singing. I think it's the first song that he's ever sung lead vocals on up until this point. And he wrote the song as well. At the time, I didn't know it was Graham. I thought it was just Damon Albarn singing because it's quite a distorted, far away voice. The way that it's mixed or produced, it sounds kind of like purposefully very like lo-fi, which apparently that's what Graham Coxon was into at that time. He was really sick of Britpop. He never felt 100% comfortable with it. If you look at the Country House video, you can see Graham Coxon looks decidedly unhappy and like he doesn't want to be there. And he was really into a kind of like lo-fi indie US alternative rock. I think you can kind of hear it in this song, but that's a great song. Apparently, you also go. He's singing that to alcohol. It sounds like a love song, like you're singing about to your girlfriend, your wife. But he was, I guess, he had alcohol problems. They were alcoholic or whatever, and he gave up drinking. And this was like his farewell song to alcohol. You're so great, and I love you. Like I've heard that that's like a technique they use in some treatment centers. I remember reading was watching a documentary with Elton John. He had cocaine issues in the 70s or 80s, and he said when he went to rehab, they made him write a farewell letter to cocaine. And Bernie Taupin, his writing partner, he read it like once he left the hospital wherever he was getting treated, and he said it was like the most beautifully affecting thing he ever read. And he said, he was quite surprised because, Elton John doesn't write lyrics. That Bernie Taupin writes the lyrics, and Elton John writes the music as a partnership. And he said he didn't think Elton had it in him to write that kind of beautiful words. But anyway, Death of a Party, another great song, very kind of like depressing sounding. And 1997, the Britpop party was kind of at an end, but also was at its height. It was in both ways, because this is the same year that Be Here Now was released, and that was kind of the axe in the head for Britpop, really, wasn't it? That was kind of the end of it, but things were still at a kind of peak. But this album was kind of blurred, kind of their message saying we've left that behind. Chinese Bombs is kind of like a punk song. Just a Killer for Your Love, that kind of uses like a drum loop on it by the sounds of it. I used to really like that song when I was younger, and nowadays not so much. One song on this I don't like. Look Inside America. That sounds like that could have come from any previous Blur album before this. And like I was saying, they do this kind of, I don't know how to even put it. The aspects of Blur I didn't like in the previous albums are in this song here. That's what I'll say. Strange News from Another Star. That's another great song. So beautiful. It's like starts off in this kind of like it's I don't know. I really have trouble putting these things into words, don't I, when I try and review these albums. Especially the albums that I particularly like. It's just so much easier if you went and listen to the song and maybe you get it for yourself. But it starts off in this kind of very simple, but kind of builds up, and the chorus has got this kind of effect, this kind of like the guitar has this like I don't know if it's like a it's not reverb, it's more than that. Like maybe it's like kind of like flanger or something on the guitar. It has this very spacey feel, which kind of matches with the name, Strange News from Another Star. And he says in the refrain in the verse, he's saying, I don't believe in me, I don't believe in me. He keeps on saying that over and again. And apparently David Albarn was going through quite a tough time in his life, dealing with fame and also dealing with kind of being hated because he was seen as a bit of a prat. He was, Oasis was seen as the working class heroes, genuine, authentic, northern working class lads who had made it big with their straightforward rock songs, whereas Blur were kind of seen as much more pretentious art school Southerners, middle class, and Damon in particular put himself out the front, and a lot of people didn't like him. They thought he was disingenuous and not real, and so I felt that that kind of affected him badly in some ways. And maybe that this song, again, the chorus, he says, I'm lost, I'm lost. He kind of repeats the same thing over again. Moving On, great song. That's kind of like a really upbeat song. And then the last one, Essex Dogs, apparently that's about him having a panic attack. And it sounds like it. It sounds like an oral panic attack. Like kind of, it's got this like weird, like it sounds like an engine, kind of revving up and then dying down in the intro. And there's a really great remix of that song. Is it this one? That Thurston Moore from Sonic Youth did. Very, very, very stripped back remix. I've got it on one of their remix albums. I've got it anyway. I bought this album, not this particular copy, but the first time I bought this in 1997. It was the school holidays, and in the school holidays, you get 2 weeks, or at least in New Zealand, you get 2 weeks rest between terms. And the job I was working at the time at a supermarket, my boss, he asked me, he said, during the school holidays, would you be interested in working full time for 2 weeks? Because one of our full time workers wants to take a holiday, and it kind of matches up. We can get you to cover his hours. And kind of on a whim, I agreed to do it. And that was my first time working adult hours, a 40-hour week as a 16-year-old. And I regretted before starting it. I was like, why did I agree to do this? I'm going to have no holiday, between school terms, be working full time. But I agreed to it, so I just kind of had to do it. But then it wasn't actually that bad, but it was hard work. I mean, the hours were like 1 p.m. to 11 p.m. at night. And for, the first time doing that as a kid, it's kind of like, it's like jumping into cold water, isn't it? It's like, shit, this is what real life is like. You kind of, you're tired a lot, and you kind of just, you go to work, you come home, you're tired, you sleep, you wake up, you try and do something that you want to do quickly, have something to week, and then you go back to work again. Didn't know that's what the rest of life would be like, but yeah. But anyway, just before starting that I bought this album as kind of like a reward to myself. Like, if you're going to work full time for the next 2 weeks, you deserve this. And this album got me through it. I connect this album really closely with that time in my life. Again, particularly a song Beetlebum. It's amazing what music can like get you through, eh? It's very powerful stuff. But so yeah, it's um it's a great album. It's, like I said, by far my favorite Blur album. Blur's got a lot of other good songs, but as a full album from end to end, this is by far my favorite Blur album. Um, Obviously, they'd made a few things after this. They went on quite a long hiatus, and they came back with the Magic Whip in 2015. That was actually a pretty good album. They recorded in Hong Kong, and they are playing a few concerts in London this year, which I would love to be able to go to, but obviously not. But yeah, highly, highly recommended. For me, it's a 5 out of 5 album. Um, Blur, Blur from 1997. Thanks for watching.